Riders on the Storm is so much more than just a great song. It's haunting, it's eerie, it's experimental and genius, it's absolute vintage Doors. But did you know it's inspired by a true story? And that it was supposedly the last thing Jim Morrison recorded before his death, if you do believe he really died at all. More on that weirdness a bit later on. Let's take a deep dive into the story behind the Doors' swan song and uncover some of the mystery surrounding it. And if you love rock history like I do, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to join our pack. So, Riders on the Storm, released in 1971 as a single on the Doors' sixth studio album, LA Woman. The album would become their last, with iconic frontman Jim Morrison, who would tragically be found dead just 2 months later. Among its many accolades, the song is sometimes referred to as the most haunting song ever recorded, and it's easy to see why. Ray Manzarek's keyboards sort of dance over a moody backing track of rain and thunder, while Jim Morrison sings of danger, murder, and a twisted mind. It's so much more than what it appears, and it's even more spooky listening in the knowledge that it was the last thing Morrison recorded before his untimely death. Again, more on that later. On the surface of things, Riders on the Storm is just another great Doors song. Mysterious, a little psychedelic, some nice jazzy touches. But underneath, it's actually pretty dark. The song was written in a precarious time in the Doors' history. At the end of 1970, the band, or more accurately frontman Jim Morrison, were on the rocks. Their tour in 1969 and 70 had been disastrous, with Jim being arrested for indecent exposure after one set in Miami, facing a 6-month jail sentence and a $500 fine. He would pass away before the case was fully resolved, though. Miami wasn't Morrison's first brush with the law either, having previously been arrested on stage in 1967. And he'd be in trouble again for drunkenness on a flight to watch the Rolling Stones in November 69, facing a sentence that carried a potential 10 years. Luckily for him, the accuser reversed their statement. And their final show of the tour in New Orleans was a complete mess, with Morrison being completely incoherently drunk and appearing to suffer a meltdown halfway through the set. That would end up being their final show together. Morrison was unraveling, and then things got worse. As they prepared to enter the studio to record LA Woman, the Doors lost long-term producer Paul Rothchild. Riders on the Storm actually had a hand in that. Rothchild apparently had no interest in working on the song or the rest of the album. Paul Rothchild taught us how to make records, but he could be quite dictatorial. He thought Riders on the Storm sounded like cocktail jazz, but he didn't really listen to the darker underbelly of the song, only the lighter lounge feel. The other nail in the coffin of that relationship was Morrison's increasing personal and substance abuse problems, leading to erratic behaviour and being difficult to work with. Losing their producer was a blow. However, the band later said it was a blessing in disguise. His quitting depressed us at first, but we rallied round. Paul suffered desperately as a result of Jim's descent into self-destruction. He had a difficult time pulling vocals out of Jim from the Soft Parade onwards. But when we were doing LA Woman, Jim got empowered by the responsibility of making the record ourselves. He had to pull the vocals out of himself. That was the difference. The Doors struck out with a new co-producer, Bruce Botnick, and modified their rehearsal room into a recording space, where they started jamming for new material. They were revitalized by the change, and Riders on the Storm started to take shape when keyboard player Ray Manzarek came up with the now iconic keyboard part for the song. Robbie and Jim were playing, jamming something out of Ghost Riders in the Sky. I proposed the bass line and piano part. The jazzy style was my idea. Jim already had the story about a killer hitchhiker on the road. Wait, hold on, killer hitchhiker? Yeah, Jim Morrison was inspired by the story of serial killer Billy Cook. He was a hitchhiker who took a family of 5 hostage for 3 days before killing them all and throwing their bodies down a mine shaft. He also killed one other in his spree as well. Not so jazzy now, is it? Morrison was actually already heavily invested in this theme. I mean, just the year before, he had released the movie An American Pastoral, where a hitchhiker kills the man who picks him up. This was also inspired by the story of, guess who? Billy Cook. Morrison played the hitchhiker. He reportedly even went as far as to call his friend and poet, Michael McClure, and claimed to have committed a similar murder just to see his reaction. And there's even more in this vein. As a younger man in the 60s, Morrison would regularly hitchhike nearly 300 miles to see his girlfriend at the time. Biographer Stephen Davis said this: "Taking chances on redneck truckers, fugitive homos, and predatory cruisers left an indelible psychic scar on Jimmy, whose notebooks began to obsessively feature scrawls and drawings of a lone hitchhiker." Did something happen to Morrison during those years? Did he see himself as the killer? Davis does take a lot of creative license, shall we say, in his book, so we'll never know. Either way, the inspiration is clear in the lyrics. There's a killer on the road, his brain is squirming like a toad. Take a long holiday, let your children play. If you give this man a ride, sweet family will die. Killer on the road. His brain is squirming like a toad is also widely believed to be a reference to being under the influence of drugs, which of course Morrison frequently was. Macabre inspirations aside, I think it's the subtle touches that lead people to call it haunting. The audio track of rain and thunder adds massive atmosphere to the track, and was surprisingly straightforward. We all thought of the idea for the sound effects, and Jim was the one who first said it out loud. Wouldn't it be cool to add rain and thunder? I used the Electra sound effects recording, and as we were mixing, I just pressed the button. Serendipity worked, so all that thunder came in at all the right places. It took you somewhere. It was like a mini movie in our heads. Don't you love it when a plan comes together? I can't imagine that song without those sound effects. Like so many great songs of the past, this one came together in just 2 or 3 takes. And it was one of the finishing touches that, for me, was a masterstroke. Right at the beginning of this video, I played you what you might think is an edit or re-recording of the song, but it's actually in the original. If you listen carefully, there's a faint and spectral whispering throughout the whole track. It's Morrison doing backing vocals. After we'd finished Riders on the Storm, I had this idea, which I suggested to Bruce Botnick, that Jim went back in and did another vocal that was just whispered, and it's really subliminal. Unless you know it's there, you don't hear it. Riders on the storm. Riders on the storm. Riders on the storm. What you just listened to was the last thing Jim Morrison put to tape. It was the last song recorded by The Doors, and the whisper voice is the last singing that Jim ever did in the studio, in the background on the ride out. How prophetic is that? A whisper fading away into eternity, where he is now. Except not everyone believes that he is in eternity, as he put it. Now I know this is going to be a bit of a touchy subject, as it is a conspiracy, but I had to give it at least a mention. It's also enough to be a video in its own right, and feel free to let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that. Now officially, Jim Morrison was found dead in a bathtub in Paris early in the morning of July 3rd, 1971 by his girlfriend at the time. He was just 27, making him a member of the infamous 27 Club. But as any Doors fan will know, some people believe Jim Morrison isn't dead, or that he may have faked his own death, or that he is dead but the truth around how and why have been covered up. Speculation has moved back and forth for years, mainly inspired by the conflicting and changing reports around the discovery of his body, changing witness statements as well, and the lack of an autopsy. Some are convinced of the conspiracy, while other fans slam it as nonsense. There's even a fan-made documentary about it, although it's unauthorized and unsubstantiated, and has been widely criticised. I'll leave that conspiracy there for now because, well, I'd love to see if you're interested in me making a full video on that. Let me know in the comments below, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of debate in the comments anyway, which I'm really looking forward to reading. Now, here's what we do know. Riders on the Storm is a fantastic song, and it helped LA Woman to revitalise the Doors' career, even if it was for just a tragically brief moment. Now, another song with a hidden, darker meaning is Blackbird by the Beatles, if you can believe. That has a really fascinating story behind it. You can click over there and watch that one next.